Before we took on the Quebec Mega Trail 50K and the multi-day stage race, the Trans-Selkirk's Run in British Columbia, Liz and I figured we needed to get out of the flat Montreal surfaces and into some hills. We did several training days at the biggest ski hill we could find nearby. For those of you who know the geography, that's actually Mont Tremblant, just north of Montreal. We would go there and power hike up and jog down. Rinse, repeat 3 times. You don't get that many Ks. I think three up and downs was about 24K, if I remember rightly. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but quite a few hours. I think 4.5 hours plus is what that took us. But that was exactly the terrain we were going to be faced with on race day. And this matches well with some of the advice in today's book, which advises us to replicate race sections, just one small part of the chapter on preparation for ultras. Hi, and welcome to Running Book Reviews podcast, where we review books written for runners, about runners, and by runners to help you decide if you'd like to read the book for yourself. We also hope that listening to us chat about running can help keep you motivated about your own running, or maybe inspire you to try something new. My name's Alan, and with my co-host Liz, we're going to talk today with author Claire Maxted, also quite well known as the Wild Ginger Runner, about her book, The Ultimate Ultra Running Handbook.
The Ultimate Ultra Running Handbook is not called Ultimate for no reason. It goes through many topics in a beginner-friendly way with lots of lists and pictures. If you have Claire's previous book, The Ultimate Trail Running Handbook, then the format will be familiar to you. Almost every trail running question is touched on during the 7 chapters, and there are also training plans for distances from 50K to 100 miles to get you started. The chapter titles are Quick Start, Preparation and Skills, Physical Training, Hydration and Nutrition, Beat Injury, Ultra Gear, which is actually very extensive, and Events. A little bit about Claire. So Claire Maxted is co-founder and former editor of Trail Running magazine. She now runs the YouTube channel Wild Ginger Running, creating films packed with trail and ultra running advice, athlete interviews, gear reviews, and race recce's, which I know what that is now.
And you pronounced it correctly.
And I pronounced it correctly. Oh,
Yeah,
that's just a
brilliant.
bonus.
Well done.
Okay, yes. Um, Her website is wildgingerrunning.co.uk for anybody that wants to check it out. We had the pleasure of speaking with Claire at the end of 2023 about her other book, and you can go back and listen to that episode if you enjoyed this one. So welcome back to the podcast, Claire.
Hi, guys. It's lovely to see you again. Thank you so much for being interested in my second book.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the first one was great. So we know that, writing a book is a huge undertaking. So what made you decide to write this book?
I think I had always planned to write the next book about ultra running because in the Ultimate Trail Running Handbook, the training plans go from 5K to 50K. So it deliberately
Mm-hmm.
stops just shy of like really going
Okay.
into any ultra running.
Okay. Cunningly planned.
Um, Yes,
Mm-hmm.
it was
Yeah.
already planned. Yeah, and so that I had always planned to pitch another book to Bloomsbury, and that would be 50K up to 150K, so like just like around the 100 miles mark. And also so when I started writing the book, I thought, oh, it's going to be really easy because I've already got the template for the Ultimate Trail Running Handbook. So
Hmm.
the Ultimate Ultra Running Handbook, I can just take that thing and like just alter everything to make it
Yeah.
ultra. But actually, there was a lot more than you might think that needed changing just from trail running to ultra running. There was a lot more different topics that I had to look over. So it was actually a bigger undertaking than I thought.
Yeah, we actually kind of noticed that because like you have 7 chapters in the first book and you have 7 chapters in the second book. And then when I went back to the first book to like sort of compare the titles, actually the titles were slightly different and not quite in the same order either. So like I guess like because trail running is like ultra running is a bit of a different beast. It's like a whole beast on its own. So yeah.
So I
Yeah.
guess what you've done is you've basically written the gateway drug book.
Yeah,
first on trail
yeah.
running, and now that you've hooked us in, you're
Mhm.
going, okay, now that you're under the spell of the trails, we're going to give you more. And here comes the Ultra Trail Running Book. Um,
Yeah, that's a really good way
so,
of looking at it,
so
indeed.
what are the main differences, do you think, for the uninitiated?
Well, I think the main differences are that there's a lot more planning involved with an ultra run. There's a
Mm,
lot more focus on what gear you might want to wear, just because everything's going on for longer. So
yeah.
there's more focus on comfortable kit, more focus on nutrition, because if you don't get that right, then you can did DNF, did not finish. And then there's lots of other just like really random things that you wouldn't even think about. Like you might need to do some navigating, you might need to run at night, you might want to use poles, and you might need a drop bag for halfway round, or it might be multi-day. So you might be thinking about multiple drop bags or carrying a little day pack and having your sleeping stuff and sleeping in a tent, that kind of thing. So there's lots and lots of just little bits and bobs like that were completely different from just doing trail running.
So, before we get to into like sort of the weeds of um, ultra running kind of sounds pretty intimidating. Like, do you think that it's easier than a marathon, or is it harder than a marathon, or is it comparable but different?
That's a great question because I've never actually done a road marathon. I've done lots of ultras. The furthest I've run is about 65 miles all in one go, sort of thing. That was the Bob Graham round back in 2013. But I've never actually signed up to run a road marathon, mainly because I think it's too far on a really hard surface and I just think it sounds horrendous. But I think if you're doing a road marathon,
Yeah,
My
if
husband
you're,
would agree with you.
yeah, you're basically
yeah.
correct, I think.
Because if you're doing a road marathon, you're probably going for some kind of time. Like you're not going to just enjoy the scenery, even if you're doing the London Marathon or the Boston Marathon or whatever. You're probably going to give it your all and to leave everything out there on that road.
Hmm.
So you're probably aiming, if you're, fairly good at running, like sub 4, if you're really good at running, like sub 3, that kind of thing. You've probably got that time in mind. So I'd say that doing anything like that is pretty difficult in terms of just the physical effort on the day. Whereas ultra running, you can go a lot slower. And in the book, I do try to make it quite inviting by calling it ultra hiking. There's a lot of hiking involved. In fact, the hillier the ultra is, the more hiking you're expected to do because you're supposed to hike up the hills because it's more efficient and then just jog down and jog the flats. So it
Mhm.
really is sort of like jogging along, eating as much food as you can, and having a lovely time and chatting to people. Whereas on a marathon, you probably wouldn't be able to chat if you were, going at max effort. So
Nope,
I
I can
personally think
guarantee.
that
You can
ultras
barely
are
breathe.
easier than marathons.
Although it can like you make it sound so like lovely and like sugar coated
Yeah.
and beautiful,
Yeah. We
but
all we
it's
all want to go and
actually
have nice chats and yummy food with Claire, having a
yeah,
ramble in the meadows with the little lambs bouncing along. That's kind of like how it,
but it's actually quite challenging when you try and do it. Um, Alan and I
and we've tried.
we've done an ultra like they were 50Ks, but they were, on pretty gnarly trails. So like the 50K would take us like 10 hours.
Wow.
So, you're out there for quite a long time. And Alan found out that sometimes eating is not quite as easy as like it sounds
Mhm.
when you're talking about it. It's
Mm.
like eat as much
Yeah.
food as you can.
Yeah.
Yes, I
Sometimes
agree.
you
So
if you have the wrong food, you get to taste it twice. Once then,
Oh no, yeah. Yeah, well, you're totally right. Nailing the nutrition side of ultra running is one of the biggest and best things that you can do, aside from, training right, sleeping right, getting your nutrition dialed in. And that just comes with practice. And you might find that at a few ultras, you might even DNF. You might not get it right the first time. So experience really does count. And just trying lots of different foods. I know everyone always says, oh, yeah, practice what you take in training. But if you're only training for, a day, if you've got an ultra that's lasting you more than 12 hours, you can't really train for what you'll need after that. So it's just a
mm,
case of doing those actual races and seeing what happens to you. And I think one of the biggest tips that I would say for food is that it needs to be moist. Like
Okay.
you
The
need to be able
tip.
to get it down. And
Yeah.
because on my program, I took loads of things that I thought would be really yummy, like cheesy cheddars, like these little cracker biscuits that you get in the
Mhm.
UK. Cheesy cheddars I took a load of pizza, and I took like loads of cracker type things. And I just found that I didn't have any moisture in my mouth and I just couldn't get them down without drinking loads.
Okay.
So then I stole someone's mashed potato. He had a Tupperware of mashed potato and corned beef.
Oh.
And yeah, I know people who, take yogurts and baked beans, cold baked beans out of the tin, even just things that are really slippery, like peaches, tinned peaches, things like that. If you've got a support crew, you can have all that kind of stuff. You wouldn't be lugging a tin of peaches around with you. But that's the kind of thing you want to be taking, moist foods, and also just
Oh.
drinking your nutrition as well, probably to just help you get that little bit extra in.
Yeah, so I mean, I found, I mean, in the 50K, I mean, it's not a really long ultra, like I'm not even going through the night or anything, but I found that like chips went down really well because they were salty, but they didn't go down really well because they were kind of dry. So
Oh,
so
yeah.
like I'm kind of a fan in general, I'm a fan of like drinking your nutrition because I find like for me that's sort of even in marathon training, like when Alan and I are doing like long runs or, like hard runs, I always find that drinking the nutrition is easier than taking gels even. Um,
Yeah.
so, but when would that stop working? Is there a point where things like gels and, those liquid carbohydrate drink mixes like Morton and, I don't know, Tailwind and all of those things, when do those, like, do they ever stop working?
Yeah, well, I've spoken to a lot of mainly elite athletes in the past, interviewed them about this kind of thing. And for them, it's like after about 7 or 8 hours. So anything beyond 7 or 8 hours, you're kind of slowing down and you're having to take on a bit of what you call real food. For me, I don't tend to use any stuff like that in ultras. I just eat real things like salted potatoes, and like cereal, a lot of cereal bars. But yeah, so uh, yeah, it really does vary from person to person, and what one person can tolerate for a whole of a 50K might not be the same as another person. But like I have been known to take veggie burgers wrapped in tinfoil, like a moist veggie burger.
Mhm.
We'll be coming back to this theme of moist,
With
and also
condiments on it, like ketchup
yeah,
and
yeah,
things.
like
Yeah.
some tomato ketchup, things like that. Um, and I've also taken a quiche as well, through the mountains in its packet. That was
Oh, that's
funny.
smart.
Yeah, it did crumple up a bit, but I kept it in
Hmm.
the little dish, and just like munched half of it and then munched the other half. It was a mini quiche, like this big, not like a dinner plate
Yeah.
quiche. But yeah, that was nice and moist again. Um, so yeah, it's just about finding things that you can personally tolerate. And the annoying thing is that something that might work for you, like about like 5 races, you do 5 50Ks and you're like, oh yeah, I found something that really works.
Dialed in.
It could not work for you in the sixth. So it really is like a facetious beast, nutrition. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But the more experience you have, I think the better you know your stomach and what it needs at what point.
I guess it's the same problem, street road marathons, you have to work on the fuel because you're going to run out at the speed you're going. Um,
Mm.
with ultras, you got to work on the fuel kind of doubly because you're going to run out for the distance you're going and the amount of time that you're going to do. And it's such a long time that anything synthetic like gels, you're going to get, I guess in marathons, you get it as kind of uh, a tiresome effect. We're eating the
Yeah,
same
taste
thing.
fatigue.
Taste fatigue. That's what I was looking for, the exact term. Um, and you've got to work against that as well as the just the fueling aspects in which you've got to get right. And the price you pay, I imagine the price you pay for getting it wrong is just a DNF basically. Yeah, you can't just
Sometimes,
slow
yeah,
down a bit.
sometimes it's just stomach problems. Like on the Arc of Attrition, I just got like a stomach pain for however many miles, which wasn't good. And actually, I did then DNF because I couldn't go faster. But maybe, like if I know these 50Ks are taking you 10 hours anyway, but I don't know if there's any option to just slow down a little bit more even and take 11 hours and just
Yeah.
focus on actually getting some good nutrition down you, because the faster you run on these ultras, the harder it is to take on the nutrition. So yeah, just slowing it down if possible with the cutoff times.
Yeah, I was just gonna say if you have any tips about like when to know if it's like a DNF situation or is it just a let's try and slow down.
Yeah, well, I suppose it depends what the cutoff times are. Because if you're chasing cutoffs and it's physically hurting you too much to make that effort to get to the next cutoff in time, then you might just be timed out. But I think with nutrition, it's it's never a DNF moment until you something really bad is happening, like you're having like too low blood sugar and you're sort of fainting or something like that, or too high blood sugar, which would also be quite quite a terrible thing to happen. But unless you felt really, really sick, and couldn't take one more step, then you could just continue going on. I know people who have just puked in a checkpoint, felt a lot better, and then just trotted off.
Mhm.
It really is up to you. Again, like so much of this ultra running stuff is just down to your how much you're personally willing to suffer. Personally, I'm not willing to suffer that much. So for me, something like a really bad stomach cramp or like needing to run off to the loo might delay me so much that I had to be timed out. But yeah, unless I was really, really on death's door with the nutrition problems, then or really had like zero energy to put one foot in front of the other, I would just try and walk for a bit. I'd take on water. A lot of gastrointestinal problems are because you're dehydrated, so your body's trying to digest the food, but the water's kind of needed elsewhere in your body to move. So if you just slow down, make sure that you've drunk enough and get some electrolytes down you, then hopefully the food will start to be processed. And maybe if you walk for half an hour, you can then start trotting along again and you'll feel a bit better. So it's not necessarily a DNF if you get your food wrong, but it's definitely good to get the balance right. But it might just take a few ultras to do that, and so many people have to drop out because of foodie issues and stomach issues. It really is a really common thing. So yeah, don't be worried about that at all. It will definitely take a few ultras if you've got the type of stomach that you need to be quite sensitive with.
I'm running with a little group in Australia at the moment who they're all ultra runners, whereas Liz and I run with a group who are more road marathoners. Um,
Mhm.
I'm running here with a little group of people who go much slower, but then when you talk to them, they've all gone, incredible distances in
Yeah,
events
yeah.
through mountains and things. So different kind of awesome. Um, and it seems to me that the sort of holy grail for them is the what they call the miler here. They call the miler. I thought, oh, mile, that's not very far. And then I realized that this is jargon for 100 miles. Do you take caffeine when you run? Lots of people do because it's in gels and stuff. And caffeine's legal and it's been proven to work. There's actual science that shows that it improves your endurance running performance.
And there's anecdotal data from when you have your coffee in the morning and you go for a workout versus when you forgot to have your coffee or you didn't have time and you went for a workout and it was terrible.
And the trouble with coffee is there's a lot of liquid just to get your caffeine dose.
Yeah, so then you have to stop for the bathroom mid-workout. Very impractical. Which is where Caffeine Bullet comes in.
What's caffeine bullet, Liz?
It's a caffeine supplement. It's wrapped up like in a candy. So, and it tastes like candy. And you can get 100 milligrams or 85 milligrams, which is about a cup of coffee, but without the liquid.
So we've tried the mint flavor and the chocolate orange flavor, and they're both pretty yummy.
If you want to try them for yourself, we do have a 20% off discount code. So go to the link in the show notes and you can check out what Caffeine Bullet is and get your 20% discount.
Pretty generous.
It is pretty generous.
And we'll get a small benefit, so you're helping out the
Speaking of which, back to the podcast.
Yeah, I was gonna say that sounds
Oh,
like a 100 miler.
they're
yeah.
saying, oh, I did the miler. I was thinking, no, that's not so far.
Yeah.
Mm.
I can do one
That's
of
100
those.
miles. So the holy grail seems to be the 100 miles. Is that generally true?
It does, doesn't it? It does seem to get a big pull and a big draw, a big focus. But I say in my book that it's not the law to ever increase your distance. Like you
Yeah.
can do an ultra, which is,
Yeah.
most beginner ultras are like 50K. But
Yeah.
it really, if you're doing a 50K,
I've
it like you
stopped
said,
there.
you did. you did your you did your 50k, and it was really technical and it was really hilly, so
Mm.
it took ages.
Yeah.
And that's great. Like, you could do 100 miler and it would take you the same time because it would be flat. So I think with ultras, it's not necessarily about the distance necessarily, but it's
Mhm.
also about all those other factors that make ultras interesting, like how
Yeah.
hilly it is, the terrain underfoot, maybe the time of year, like how much daylight you've got, when it starts, where it is, like the climate could be really hostile. There's so many other factors you might need to navigate. There's so many other factors in ultra runs that make them tricky and make them a challenge, that it's not necessarily all about getting to that 100-mile marker. Having said that, a lot of people do like to bag 100 in their lifetimes, and it's definitely something that I've considered doing. Like I've done like 50Ks and 50 milers, and then thought, oh, the next step is, like maybe 65, 75 miles, and then maybe I'll do a 100 miler. But having got to the 50-mile point, and sort of enjoyed it up to 40 miles, and then gone for the last 10 miles, found it, tricky and hurting. I just kind
Hmm.
of thought, I don't really want 50 more miles of that. Like,
Yeah.
I'm happy not to ever, at this point in my life, I am happy to never do a 100 miler. Like, I don't think it's a prerequisite for being an
Mm.
ultra runner. I think if you get to a distance that you like, if you try an ultra and you like it, but then you just prefer half marathons, just stick at half marathons or half trail marathons, or make your own adventure up. It's not like a mandatory thing that ultra runners have got to do. I do get that you do feel pressure, but you don't have to ever increase the distance. It's not the law. And I actually specifically say that in one of the like little box outs in the book. You don't have to do a 100 miler at
Mm.
all. I looked through like I made a list of 20 to see which one would be the easiest for me to do, because a flat one would be not easy for me to do because I find it really boring. But I just in the end just thought, no, right now at this point in my life, like with a 4-year-old, I just can't spare that kind of training, and it's not something that's really high on my bucket list at the moment. And I just think I'd be miserable. So
No.
I like to enjoy my life.
I mean that's great. I have to say that I share your perspective. Like I don't know, I've done 50K a few times, and every so often like I feel like maybe I'll do 50 miles, but I don't really feel like doing 100 miles.
Yeah. 50K is a lovely distance. I love the 50K. It's a great day out, isn't it? It's a day out in
Hmm.
the mountains. It's a whole day, but you're not running through the night. And you can you
Yeah.
Mhm.
can train for that quite, readily. You can bounce up to that in your training plan, a bit like you could a marathon.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the marathon of the ultra running world, isn't it? It's the
Hmm.
it's a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love a 50K.
I should probably jump in and before Liz gets to it and ask you the question about going through the night because Liz is
Hmm.
obsessive. Every time we talk to anybody about any sort of long distance, she gets obsessively concerned about hallucinating in the
Hmm.
nighttime and going through the night, having to run, and how impossible it seems.
I'm
Um,
worried about people's
so I
safety.
thought maybe I should jump in and ask the question.
You
Yeah.
should. Thanks, Alan.
Well, I think everyone's different, of course, but going through one night is kind of doable. Like we've all been out partying till 5 in the morning in our youth, and like you can survive
Mm.
that. So going through one night is fine usually for most people. You might need a power nap, but I've done it several times where you just go through the night and you just sleep a lot the next night. I think it's when you go through the second night, that's when the potential for hallucinations and real kind of difficulties start. So, and then obviously on these multi-day races, which are not stage races, the sort of the non-stop races where you just grab 2 hours or 20 minutes when you
Hmm.
can, like laying on
Hmm.
the side of the trail like a dead person.
Mm.
Like those are the races where you start getting the hallucinations. So I don't think, Liz, you need to worry if you're thrilled with your 50Ks. You might do a 50 just to really challenge yourself one
Yeah.
time, but you don't need
Hmm.
to worry about running through the night on a 50 unless it starts at like 6 p.m. or something. You're
I
not
wouldn't
probably
enter
going to
that
do
one, I
anything in
don't
the night.
think. Mm.
Yeah,
We did get around that
yeah.
by doing a multi-stage race where we did 5 days, but you get
Sleep
to
in
sleep.
between.
Mm.
So
Yeah,
you
I love
finish the
those type of
stage, you
races.
go to
So
bed,
fun.
get up in the morning, run again.
Yeah, that's my ideal, like about 20 or so, like below the marathon distance every day, like, and then just running like half to marathon distance every day for a few days is a great holiday, I think.
Yes. Yeah, I agree. Like we've done two. One of them was 5 days, the other one was 3 days. And
Mm,
I like that format a lot. Like those
mm,
are fun. You get to know people.
mm.
Everybody has slept the night before, and you get on a brand new starting line every day with the same people. So you kind of also, experience like a little bit of camaraderie, and you get to know some people. So it's pretty, that's really fun.
We should
For
Yeah,
the people,
really fun.
we
yeah.
should give our those runs a shout out actually for the organizers. That was the Trans-Selkirks run, which is in the Rocky Mountains in British Columbia in Canada. 5 days, absolutely beautiful. And
Mhm.
Run the Rocks in Moab in Utah. Um,
Both by the
in,
same
am-
organizer,
in
the
amongst all the
Trans Rockies.
red rock formations. Absolutely fantastic stuff.
Hmm.
Oh, they sound really good. I like the idea of those.
Yeah.
So I think basically there's a kind of a couple of there's two different types of ultra running. One where you kind of, you're pottering along, you're enjoying yourself, you're making the most of it, you're looking at the views, and you're really enjoying being part of nature. And the other one is where you're really seeing how far your body can be pushed, and you're pushing like your personal limits. And there's no sort of like there's no better one. But it's just the one that I prefer is the one where I like I'm not so miserable that I can't look at the scenery or be nice to people. So
Hmm.
I'm not interested in like pushing my body as far as it can go until it literally breaks and I'm in loads of pain. I'm not interested in that. I've done that in my youth and I'm
Hmm.
done with that now. I like having a nice life with a little bit of a challenge, but it's just completely up to you and what you want out of ultra running. You can like throw everything at it and, do some insane things, and that's amazing, but you don't have to.
Yeah, I have to say that like when you're doing these multi-day races where you like end up going somewhere new and all this stuff and
Mm,
you're doing it a bit for or at least for me, it's a bit for the experience. And I do like to push myself to see how far I can go, but I like to do it in like a 5K or like a
mm,
10K,
yeah,
not, not like over like 100 miles, you know? So
yeah.
I think those things are more of like an experience, a photo op, you're like running with your friends. So that would be sort of the type of environment that I would want. But for those people that do like to push themselves,
Mm,
and like are gonna, do let's say 100 miler and they're gonna run through the night, you mentioned in your book that it's not necessarily necessary to train for running through the night. So,
mm,
I want you to explain why, because like I know one person that was running 100 milers, and it's our friend Pete that runs with us in the same running club. And he's done a few 100 milers. And I remember that he used to go out on runs like at midnight. Um,
hmm.
and yeah, like yeah, I was a bit intrigued by the fact that, like you mentioned, that you don't need to do that because so that was one of the reasons that I didn't ever want to do a 100 miler because I was like, I don't feel like training at midnight.
Yeah, no, you absolutely don't have to. Um, like there's a coach that we use quite a lot on Wild Ginger Running YouTube channel where I put a lot of my content, and he says if you're really worried, if your ultra is going to take you through the night and to see the sunrise, and you're really worried about it and you've never really run at night before, then yeah, you could spend one weekend like where you run through the night. Just to experience it and know and have that confidence in your head that everything's going to be okay. But to regularly train, messing up your sleep cycle like that is just more going to be a massive detrimental effect on your training because the best recovery that you've got is sleep. So once you know how your head torch works, like by all means run in the dark, like it gets dark at 5 p.m. in the winter here,
Hmm.
then by all means run in the dark to check how your head torch works. But there's no need to go out like all night long. Maybe pop out at 11 if it's summer and it's not getting dark till 11 p.m. Yeah, maybe do an 11 till 12 p.m. run just to check how your head torch is working and check that you know where everything is and just a little bit of practice. But regular training at a time when you really should be sleeping is really not necessary. and it'll just be detrimental to your training and you might get injured. So personally, I would just not recommend that.
I guess it's a similar philosophy to marathon training, where people say, well, don't run, 26 miles on a training session a lot because it's just going
Yeah,
to be detrimental to your recovery and it's not going
exactly.
to help
You
your
sort of
training.
spring up to it.
Yeah. One of the really good sections that you have in your book is about gear. Um,
Hmm.
I can read between the lines reading your book to see that you are a gearophile. You are very much into the gear. Um, you've obviously studied all aspects. There seems to be
Been
a lot
around a
of
long time.
there seems to there seems to be a lot of stuff. Can you give us a little sort of précis, maybe some essential items or some particular
And some
things that
nice
are
to haves.
favorites of yours?
Yeah, so for ultra running, there does seem to be a lot of kit, doesn't there? If you look on the mandatory kit list for a race, you're like,
Mm.
oh, good Lord, how am I going to get all this stuff? Like some of it you can beg, steal, and borrow from friends. So don't worry about getting it all brand new or get it online, get it secondhand. But probably the minimum things that you need is obviously a pair of trail running shoes or trainers. Um, and then for ultra running, you're going to need a little backpack to put like spare layers in and carry your drink and carry some food and snacks and your phone and things like that. And, any of the emergency stuff that the race requires, like an emergency bag, a little foil bag thing, and a first aid kit.
Mm.
So those are really essential, a pair of shoes and a backpack. And this is above what you probably already have as a runner. And then you probably already have a running jacket as a runner, even as a marathon runner. But for ultra runs, they often say, like in the UK, I don't know about America because it doesn't rain as much, but they will say have a jacket with taped seams, so fully waterproof jacket with taped seams, and with a hood as well, just for extra protection. So there you've got your shoes, your backpack, and your jacket. And that's kind of all you need, really. But then some nice to haves on top of that would be hiking poles, some lightweight hiking poles, so that when you're doing the longer ones, Mike, maybe you don't need them for a 50K or even a 50. Some people don't really bother with them. But if you're going to be out for a long time, you've got a lot of uphills that you want to power up, then a pair of hiking poles can be really useful. The lighter the better, but not too light because you can't put full weight on them and they bend. So kind of a compromise. I talk about it in the book. And then a watch is good to have as well. So you can just use your normal watch and calculate your pace on that. But when you're ultra running, if you're out for a long time, you kind of stop being able to do maths. I mean, I'm not great at maths at the best of times, but when you're trying to think and you've been out for 10 hours, then pace on your watch, it's handy to have a GPS watch. Some ultras you need to navigate as well. So it is handy to have one of those really spangly GPS watches, which has a tiny, tiny map on it and a little
Hmm.
trail and an arrow. I find those really hard to see because they're just tiny. So I prefer the OS Maps app on my phone. I don't know what you'd have in America, but it's kind of like a sat nav, but for the mountains. And it's really, really useful. So those are nice to have things as well. And then a head torch if you are going to be either finishing after sunset or starting just before sunset. The race will tell you what kind of size and length and brightness of head torch that you should have, and whether you should need a spare as well. And then yeah, that's basically it. I mean, yeah, you can over couple of years you can get all that sorted for not too much money. Ask Santa, put
Hmm.
it on your Christmas list. Yeah, it's not too bad.
And then a small trailer with all the food in.
Yeah, a little trailer to lug along behind
Yeah.
you,
Hmm.
or a drone with food that follows you.
Oh, that sounds great, actually.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, we say that as a joke. Now there are people who've heard that and they're off designing the drone.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, the feed station drone.
Drone.
Yep. Everyone's ultra running with like a drone next to them. Oh, yeah, food. And it'll be drone supported or not drone supported.
Do you have any things that you've had for a long time or that you love that have become your beloved items?
Oh yeah, I really enjoy my Innovate Trail Fly shoes because they've got a really wide fit,
Yeah,
but they're not zero drop. Like every single
yeah.
wide um fit shoe that you seem to get seems to also want to be zero drop. And it's like, no, I
Yes.
do have a wide foot, but I don't want to be zero drop because I'll
Yeah.
get injured. So yeah, ultras don't really work for me. Topo don't have enough cushioning, even though they're 5 mil.
Mm.
And yeah, so the Innovate Trail Fly is 6 mil drop, and it's got a good amount of cushioning and a really grippy sole because they use Vibram and the graphene grip as well.
Yeah.
And yeah, so the trail flies I'm really enjoying at the moment. And then leggings wise, I really like, I shouldn't really recommend. I feel bad recommending these leggings because they cost like 200 quid. And because
Uh-oh.
I review
Oh.
gear all the time, I get them for free. So
Yeah.
it's
Mhm.
a
Okay.
little bit of an annoying recommendation.
Yeah.
But this latest SOAR
Yeah.
running leggings
Yeah.
are just really, really good. Like they're just really Gucci. They're like the
These
Gucci
are,
Like,
for
are
running
they
well.
like, do they just fit really well and don't
Yeah,
slide down
yeah.
kind of with
yeah,
time? Because sometimes, like,
yeah.
I
They
find
don't
some
slide
leggings,
down.
yeah, some
Yeah,
leggings
they've
for
got
women
quite a
do
high
that.
waist and a wide
Hmm.
waistband, and they've got this really ingenious pocket at the back, which is large and stretchy, and you can actually put a waterproof through the back,
Mm.
a lightweight waterproof through the
Oh,
back.
okay, smart.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So that's really good.
So
Yeah,
don't
and
so don't seem to be
then
very present in North America.
And
Are
yeah,
they an English
oh,
mark?
okay.
Are they a British mark?
like where do they come from?
Thor.
Like, where does it
Oh,
originate
it's
from?
an
Do you
English
know?
guy.
Yeah.
He's
Oh,
called
okay.
Tim Thor. And
Okay.
the reason that his clothes are priced so highly, is that they're made, he tries to do everything really ethically. So the factories are in Portugal rather than China, and he
Okay.
uses
Okay.
factories that use the most eco-friendly manufacturing processes. So a lot of
Okay.
the bad side of making
Yeah.
outdoor gear comes from the manufacturing side of things, and
Okay.
especially how much water they use to produce things, and the chemicals they use in the dyes and all sorts of things like that. So that's why it costs loads more money. That's what he said anyway. I did interview him about it.
Oh,
Liz,
okay. Oh, that's interesting.
Liz is now quickly sizing you up to see whether you're the same size because you've probably got some spare ones, and that's the
I
only
think
way
she'd be
we're
a
going.
lot slimmer than me.
But here, like, so I'm just gonna say on the tights side, I mean, tights tend to be kind of pricey anyway because here in North America, like Lululemon is very present, and
Oh, okay,
Lululemon
yeah.
tend to have a like really good fit. I don't know, I have a really old pair, so they just they just have a really good fit. They're stretchy in the right places, so they don't like slide down, and they have the wide waist belt, and they have like pockets on the side, which back
Mm,
when I got these tights, that was not, it wasn't common. Like now all the
mhm,
companies have the like pockets on the side or they'll have some kind of storage for gels and things, but it wasn't so common before. So this was yeah, this was like I thought it was such a great find when I first got them. They're getting
yeah.
kind of old now, but yeah, they do last a long time. Usually when you pay a lot, like it lasts a long time, but
Yeah,
um
you hope so.
yeah.
Hey.
You have to get the fit right because for sure if you buy something and it doesn't fit right and you paid a lot of money for it, you don't want it to last too long.
Liz,
Yeah, I think I saw do this 30-day trial thing. So you can buy something, and if it doesn't fit you right, you can send it back and they'll give you a credit note. So yeah, there is an investment, their kit,
Oh
for
wow.
sure.
probably
Great.
so need to make some inroads into North America, and we could be those inroads. So if
Yeah,
you
you could be the testers.
just send Tim Thor towards us, Claire, and
I'll put you in
we're
touch.
pretty keen. Just on the Innovate English thing, Liz and I both have Innovate rain jackets, which
Hmm.
in fact have sparked a lot of interest from our Canadian friends because they're basically perfect. And I pointed out to our Canadian friends that they're perfect because they're made in England and
Mm,
the English are
yeah.
experts at rain.
Yes,
Um,
unfortunately we are.
Hmm.
so we are very much orientated towards those. I think that's called storm shell or something.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah,
don't
that's
Fantastic
right.
remember what they're
coats,
called.
Bombshell.
fantastic
Yeah.
coats, super light and race compliant in terms
Mm,
of taped seams and things like that, which is super good.
Just in terms of cold weather and cold weather running. So you actually have like a really interesting section about cold weather running, and there was a few tips, like things like if you see a runner that's hypothermic, I think you recommend that you try and give them something sweet to eat and things like that, which was that was like really interesting advice. But let's say we want to try and prevent being cold in the first place. Do you have like a favorite tip that you like to give, let's say maybe new runners or runners that are doing maybe an event that's sort of in the spring or fall when sometimes the temperatures can be close to 0 degrees Celsius and it might be raining, which I think like is the worst combination. So at least it is for me because I find like I get all wet and cold, and even if I dress a
Yeah.
lot, then I get cold because I'm wet.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
then if it's windy as well, that's even worse, isn't it? It just
Oh
cuts through your
yeah.
eye. Yeah, it's really
Hmm.
bad. Yeah, so cold. Yes, we've got a very good experience being cold, wet, and windy here in the UK for sure. So to prevent it, it starts before you even start running. So you need to pack more layers than you think, and always pack a spare. And then make sure that those layers are in plastic bags in your bag because there's no use taking the extra layers unless they stay dry. So, so yeah, you might want like a little lightweight synthetic jacket even in there.
Hmm.
Um, and spare gloves as well, because gloves are the type of thing that can get wet. And then if you've got cold hands, then you struggle to do anything else. You struggle to do your zips. You struggle to get layers on and off. You struggle to eat and look after yourself generally. So a spare pair of gloves, if not a spare pair of gloves. And I have been known to actually take those big mountaineering gloves or mittens
Hmm.
on runs with me because even if you've got wet liner gloves, if you pop one of them over the top, you can even dry them if you're generating enough heat. So yeah, like a liner pair and a big over pair is a good idea. So yeah, going a little bit more heavy with more layers in your bag to put on if you start getting cold is a good idea. But also it's being mindful that if you're running, even if it's really, really, really cold out, you can get really hot inside under all those layers that I've
Hmm.
just told you to pack, and you're waterproof as well. So if you are getting hot, then do strip off a bit and just put them in your bag. Because if you start getting wet from the inside too much, then that can be equally really miserable once you start slowing down a bit. And then probably the tip would be to just notice, just be aware that you might be starting to get cold. So I know that there's a really amazing runner from the UK, Nikki Spinks. You've probably heard of her. Some people have probably heard of her for doing a double Bob Graham and things like that.
Yeah.
She's an absolute legend, and she said once in an interview with me that just if you think something three times, once you've thought of it three times, don't ignore yourself the fourth time, just get it done. So if you're thinking, oh, I'm hungry, and you've thought, oh, I'm a bit hungry, you just, oh, a bit hungry. Oh. The third time, to actually get that food out and eat it. Make sure you're looking after yourself.
Hmm.
And similarly, if you're feeling a bit cold, if your hands start to feel a bit cold, don't just push on. Address the problem immediately and keep yourself in that nice balance, in that nice warmth. And hopefully that should prevent hypothermia.
Okay, that's brilliant advice from Nikki Spinks as well.
Hmm.
Just changing it up. Once we get out there on the trails, and I've experienced this myself, and I think everybody does. Once you get out there doing ultra running, you get out in the environment, the sort of pristine environment, and you sort of become automatically a bit of an environmentalist.
Oh,
Not a
yeah.
wacky environmentalist, but I think you just appreciate being out in it so much. You go, well, this is wonderful. We should take care of this environment a little bit. So, do you have any advice for beginners in terms of
Etiquette or
eco advice for being on the trails?
Yeah, the easiest thing to do is not to drop any litter. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
sure everyone listening to this podcast is not intentionally flinging their gel wrappers onto the trail.
Hmm.
But yeah, just in the same way that you're not dropping any litter, if you see any litter, you could pick it up, especially if it's gels. We don't want to give trail runners a bad name.
Yeah.
You hardly see them
Yeah.
though.
Gel wrappers give
Yeah,
the
so
game away, don't they? Who did it?
yeah, it could be cyclists.
Yeah.
But yeah, like just picking up if you can, like if you've got like a spare pocket, or if you take like a little dog, like a little dog poo bag. We
Hmm.
have like, we call them poo bags here. You
Mm-hmm.
can just put the odd, like, just if you see a crisp packet, just pick it up and just keep the trails clear for everyone. That's a really nice way of giving back to the environment. And then there's bigger things you can do, like we've all been told we've got to reduce our carbon footprint. That was actually an idea made up by BP to make us feel personally guilty for the imprint that we have on the world. And actually, there's loads more we can do if we, have a voice and take collective action against the bigger, massive companies that are pumping out all sorts of harmful chemicals, etc. But it is, helpful to be mindful of your own carbon footprint, and not fly loads and loads if you can. I mean, I can't sit here and preach to anyone about flying. I've flown loads in my life for different places all over the world. But now that I am a bit more climate aware, I haven't flown anywhere for about 2 years. So, so yeah, just being more mindful
Yeah.
of big carbon outputs like that, and sharing lifts to races is a really good way of achieving that as well. And not having too many children.
Yeah, also sharing races can be fun because you
Mm,
get in the car all together and I
yeah,
mean at
Road
the big
trip.
like yeah, road trip. Like the ride there sometimes is very quiet if it's like just you're going to a 5K, but like if
yeah.
it's if it's a marathon or something, it's fun because you're driving for 2 hours or whatever, at least you're not driving by yourself. So
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
fun.
Yeah, sharing lifts is really fun. And you can also eat differently as well. Like if you eat a few vegetarian and vegan meals a week, then that helps the environment, that helps the carbon footprint as well. And then, yeah, just being a bit aware of where your gear comes from as well, and repairing your gear, not always buying new stuff. This helps your wallet as well. So this is a good one to do, like repairing stuff and reusing things and buying secondhand. That's really useful on both counts. Um, and yeah, just also using your voice, like going to protests and things like that, and signing anything that comes through from any green sort of conservation organizations, any petitions that are going. Maybe it's working on the trail, like giving back in that sense as well, like repairing the footpaths. If you've got any projects in the area that you live in, just sign up to volunteer, and yeah, and give back in that way as well. There's a ton of stuff you can do that's really, really
Mm.
quite fun, rather than just, oh, don't eat meat and don't do this and don't do that. You can actually give as
Hmm.
well by doing some footpath repair on your favorite trails.
I
Oh,
noticed
that's a
that
good idea.
in the events section that there are no UTMB based events, and UTMB are an organization that have come in for some criticism recently for their sort of commercial and environmental policies, in particular the sponsorship from Dacia, who were a Chinese motor company who are not renowned for their environmental policies.
Yeah.
Was that deliberate by you?
Yeah, it is. Yes, it's
Okay.
very clever of you to have picked up on that. Yeah, it is deliberate because I am in the Green Runner, so I am aware of the Dacia or Dacia or whatever it is
Yeah.
sponsorship. Um, but then having said that, I drive a car. It's a diesel car. I can't
Mm.
afford an electric car. And also, there's children chipping away in cobalt mines in Africa getting the stuff for the batteries for us. So, it's like, which is the more evil?
Yeah.
Um, so I think the solution is probably to use cars less. But yeah, I have abandoned the UTMB bit, but it's also because everyone already knows about the UTMB. So I don't think they need any more publicity. So I'd
Yeah.
rather put in some races that aren't the UTMB,
Hmm.
because there's so many people going to the UTMB. We need to know
Hmm.
about some different ones. So yeah, that it's partly the Dacia sponsorship, um, but it's just tricky. It's just, where do you draw the line? Like, any company that sponsors them
Yeah.
is going to have some kind of environmental along the way. It's just, where do you draw that line? Like, obviously, if it was sponsored by some kind of arms dealer, everybody would be up in arms. But it's a bit of a grey area when it's a car, because we all do drive cars. So
Yeah.
so
Hmm.
yeah, it's just a little bit of a little bit of a semi stance that I've taken, but I do want to run the Arc of Attrition 50 next year again. And now they're sponsored by they're a UTMB race now. So
Oh.
that's really scuppered me because I do want to go back to that race.
Hmm.
So I might have to overlook it for that. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's a bit hypocritical of me. But I just thought, well, UTMB don't need any more promo.
I mean, I think already sort of being conscious that these things exist and like that UTMB is, because I guess you're not going to every UTMB race, but maybe you'll go to one. Already having sort of that conscious awareness is part of it because I think, just a lot of people don't know. So they don't, UTMB is always, publicized and you have lots of great runners going there and competing at a high level. And so it's reasonable that a lot of people want to go and they don't know all of
Exactly.
the background.
And even if they do, I mean, they might just not care. I mean, there's a lot of people that don't care. Or there's a lot of people that think someone else should be sorting it out, and no one has all the answers. So it's just up to everybody. And again, it's another individual preference. But I wouldn't ever say to anyone, oh, you shouldn't do the UTMB. I wouldn't ever say, oh my goodness. I've been there and I've reported on the race many times, and it's an absolutely fantastic event. And when you see people coming over the finish line to that amazing song, the Evangelist,
Hmm.
you do want to do that race. And it is something that I have considered before. And I'd love to do the Tour of Mont Blanc, but just not in one go. I'd do it like over 6 days, like 20 miles a day
Hmm.
business. So yeah, it is a route that I would love to do, and it's a race that I'd love to be fit enough to do, but I just would never be that fit. So I don't have to worry about my slight boycott.
Oh, well, never say never because you one day you might be super fit. Like for sure, if you have young kids, then it changes how much time you have to train, but they do grow up. So,
Yeah.
Yes.
Then they have their own babies, and then your time goes down again.
Oh no.
Alan knows a little bit about that. So, we're conscious of your time. So, just a few last questions. For people that do get a copy of the book, how did you intend for them to read it? Is it sort of like your first book where you've kind of intended for it to be a dip in to the sections that you need as you need them, or is it cover to cover kind of reading book?
Oh, I think people should just dip in and read what they want to read. Yeah, read it on the toilet. I'm not offended by that as well. Dip in and out wherever you want. There's quite a good index as well. Like if you've got a particular issue or like a question or a problem, just like flip to the back and have a look there. But also the contents is quite a good place to start as well. You don't have to start right at the beginning. It works to read it from start to finish to sort of lead you through, but you
Yeah.
absolutely don't have to.
And do you want to direct people anywhere in particular to get their copy?
No, just Google it and see what comes up.
Yeah.
It'd be nice if you bought it from an independent bookstore. That's always nice to support your local businesses. So
Hmm.
that's good. But yeah, equally, if you want to get it on Amazon, then absolutely fine.
Perfect. And then, do you want to just tell everybody where they can follow you to see what you're up to?
Yes, yes, I've got a YouTube channel. It's called Wild Ginger Running, and it's got lots of training advice. So actually, if you have any questions and you haven't got the book already, you can always Google your question plus the words Wild Ginger Running, and it should bring up everything that I have on the topic, in video form. And you can watch that and learn lots. And then I'm on Instagram as well as Wild Ginger Running, so you can follow me there as well. I'm not super active on the old social media, basically because I'm getting old, and it's
Too
just a
much
bit much
faff.
sometimes, isn't it? That's why I like to write a book because you can dip into that when you want, and hopefully you
Yeah.
won't doom scroll the book. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, but you can follow me on there. And if people want to ask me questions, comment on the YouTube videos. I can answer questions there. Just pop me a little comment on Instagram, and I will eventually get to that. But I check the YouTube comments more. So if anyone's got a burning question that they want answering, then comment on YouTube, and I will get back to them.
Okay.
Okay. And they can't doom scroll the book because it's got such lovely photos that, like
Yeah,
how can you feel doom and gloom when you're looking at
yeah.
that?
It's
Yeah.
trail runners porn basically. It's just wonderful photographs all the way through.
Yeah, I tried to make the pictures a bit more diverse than I've seen in other trail running books. I think it's really important to
Hmm.
to try to represent a bit more ethnic diversity in the world of ultra running because it does
That's
tend to
good.
be sort of pale and male and sorry, yeah, Alan,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
white. So it was nice to be able to
Pale and
put in like
old.
there's Tasneem, she's there running in her hijab because she's Muslim.
Mm,
There's people of color, there's older people, there's larger people, there's younger people. So yeah, hopefully you can lots of people will be able to see themselves in the book and
yeah,
in the little comments that
yeah.
there's people's voices throughout, like people who have either experts writing in advice or just people with their real runners with their own experiences. So hopefully you'll be able to identify with somebody somewhere in the book.
I think just like your trail running book, I think one thing this book does is it really opens up the idea of ultra running to every man. If
Yeah.
you're kind of interested in doing hiking, but a bit more, or trail running, but a bit more, suddenly it all looks possible.
Yeah,
When you look
hopefully
at the
it
book.
demystifies it a bit.
Yeah,
It's just ultra hiking, really.
It's just hiking with some running in between
Yeah,
sometimes.
it's a hiking picnic with a little bit of running.
Okay, great. Well, thanks so much for joining us. And, we know it's time for bed for you because it's later in the UK than it is
Yes,
over here
coming
in
up 9 o'clock.
Montreal.
yeah,
Yeah, we really appreciate your time, though, and appreciate you coming on the podcast.
yeah.
And
Thanks
we'll let you,
incredibly.
Amazing. Thanks so much, guys.
So should we do our little potted summaries?
yeah, do you want to go first?
Yes, I can go first. I've got my stuff up in front of me, my little notes. So, the Ultimate Ultra Running Handbook, the only book I've ever come across that has two words beginning with U in the title by Claire Maxted. Well, I would say it's both a great coffee table book and packed with good advice and ideas. So, a how-to book as well as a coffee table book. I learned quite a few things. I learned, for example, that the International Distress Code if you're in distress is six whistle blows followed by a space. I never knew that. So now if I hear that, I know there's someone in distress. I think it's geared towards ultra running for the beginners or the learners, not the extreme experts. Um, Although it is motivating at all levels. So even if you're an expert and you read this, you want to go out and do your next event. We didn't talk too much about it. Claire touched on it at the start, but there are training plans also in there for different distances and skill levels for I guess 50K and upwards events. The pictures, well, you probably wax lyrical about the pictures, so I'll skip over that. The pictures are great. If you want to go longer but not faster, and maybe want to get into a new adventure, I think check this book out. This could be the book that's going to be your gateway drug to those types of events. So all in all, a fun book to have, dip into and read.
So, as you probably heard, the pictures are spectacular. Claire put a lot of thought into them, and the cover photo is stunning again, just like the first book. So, yeah, I find she's like so good at putting together these books that look almost like flipping through a magazine. And we did talk about that in the first episode with her. I think she mentioned that she has a lot of experience writing for magazines, so she did kind of want it to have that feel, and it really does. So it's almost like, sometimes you'll be reading a magazine and it'll have some articles in it, and they'll be on different topics, and each, every so often, like those topics will come back. Well, it's like Claire took all of the magazines for, I don't know, a year, and she put all of the topics and groups to make chapters, but like the same cute little format where like you can read about a thing. You have these little bubbles and boxes of, someone's experience. And yeah, it's super well put together. I mean, if you have Claire's first book, I mean, she basically doesn't disappoint. It's the same kind of format. I love that in the race chapter, Claire introduced some ideas to make things out of race memorabilia. So, like she mentions a quilt from race shirts that you have too many of. So if your drawer is completely bursting, she also has some ideas about things you can do with your race medals and things like that, which I thought that was such a great addition because so many people that I hear about like get to a point where they sort of throw them in the garbage. And um it's like one kind of wasteful and two a little bit sad because sometimes like you might look at those race shirts 10 years down the line and you'll have kind of forgotten that you did a certain thing. So sometimes I don't know, I put them in a shoebox. I know some people just throw them away, but I think like they could be fun to keep around and maybe you can turn them into something that's useful, like a quilt. I would recommend this book, I guess, to anyone who's signed up for their first ultra, or if you're curious and you want to know more about the logistics before deciding on a race. Perfect book.
Fantastic. Thank you for listening to another episode of Running Book Reviews. A big thank you to the publisher, Bloomsbury, for providing Liz and I with review copies of the book. And a huge thank you to Claire for spending time with us today. Claire was talking to us from the UK and it was kind of past her bedtime and she has a 4-year-old son. So we really appreciate that sacrifice by her. Thank you, Claire. If you'd like to leave us feedback about how we can improve our podcast, or you want to suggest a book that you would like us to review for future episodes, please leave us a comment on social media. We are Running Book Reviews on Facebook and Instagram, and on Twitter we are reviews_running. Please also follow us on social media to find out about new episodes, when they are released, or you can just subscribe to the podcast on your favorite streaming platform. If you've been listening to us for a while and you're wondering about how you can help us out, here are some ways. If you're enjoying the podcast, spread the word. Tell your friends about us or share a link to your favorite episode with a running partner. You can also leave us reviews on Apple Podcast if this is how you listen. You can actually leave us a written review there. Or you can rate us on Spotify out of 5 stars. We're also on a platform called Buy Me a Coffee. If you go there, go to buymeacoffee.com, look up creators running book reviews, and you can see a whole bunch of snippets, blogs, photographs, outtakes, all free of charge. You can buy us a coffee if you want, but there's no obligation. That's all for today from Running Book Reviews. Bye for now.
Bye.